Right.
All right, puppies and kittens, we have Jackson Roe back on. He gave us a presentation last week that went swimmingly. I thought it was, somebody's going to show me a PowerPoint on something. I didn't expect it to go as well as he did, but it did pretty well. So we're not going to do it again. And I've told him that we've already done a video on how paleontology disproves Noah's flood and how geology disproves Noah's flood, and he's like, well, yeah, but I got more. So, all right, Jackson, let's hear it.
All right, let me pull up the presentation.
Okay.
Okay, hang on a second. All right. Are you seeing it?
One moment.
Okay.
There you go. Here it is.
All right. Okay. The fossil record, periods of time, not hydrologic sorting or ecologic zonation. There are some other weirder arguments, but those are the two main ones creationists have.
Why don't you explain both of them? I mean, I can do hydrologic sorting pretty well, but I want to hear how you do either of them.
Okay. It's like smaller things are at the top, big things are at the bottom. That's what hydrologic sorting would kind of mean, except it's sort of inverted. Ecologic zonation, they think certain environments got preserved, like they think the Cambrian the Cambrian mostly is an aquatic environment, but they think somehow no other aquatic environments were mixed in with this because this is a specific environment. It's not a very good argument, but that's what they're saying. I'll get more into
So for comparison on this, one of the arguments that I heard is that certain species are identified with the, say, Jurassic period or whatever, because there were these tsunamis that would be coming inland, and certain animals couldn't run farther or faster to get away from
one
them.
of the arguments. That's
you would end up in this lower area, and then humans end up at the top of all of these different levels because we were the most adept at running from tsunamis.
Right.
We are the species, remember, that in 2004, when the tides went out in Indonesia and other places, people just like walked out into the barren wasteland saying, hey, where'd all the water go?
Yeah, where'd all the water go?
And then the 50-foot waves come in on top of us. And this argument would imply that we can outrun velociraptors and pterosaurs.
Right. Somehow we outflew the pterosaurs. Right. I get into pterosaurs.
And then the hydrologic sorting, when you have a jumbled mess of rocks and sand and everything, you shake it up and just let it settle as it would. You are going to get, if you shake it up enough, you're going to get the heavier stuff at the bottom, or you're going to get the finer grains. We'll probably get down below those, but if it's got to be finer grains to get past the big rocks, otherwise it's the weight that wins out. And what you don't get is layers of mudstone and then siltstone and then sandstone and then these different types that have different type environments in order to set and become lithographic. So there's like different conditions. You wouldn't have, say, like whole layers of calcite and then you get into a different layer where it's up. What we have a geologic explanation for. This is where the shoreline crept in and then receded, and so it has all these changes. If you study historical geology, you see all of that, but you don't see, from hydrological sorting, you would not have anything looking like a geologic column. And let's remember that the animals that are associated with the Jurassic are found worldwide. The animals that are associated with the Permian are found worldwide.
That's right.
Yeah, and they're always in those layers. So there's some truth to that geologic column.
There definitely is, and I'll get into that pretty thoroughly, I think. So first of all, this is me in the Eocene, in an Eocene layer of eastern Arkansas.
Wait, you're in the Eocene?
So no, I had to go.
When Ken Ham asks, "Were you there?" You can say yes.
Oh yes, I was there 40 million years ago or so. That's right.
Coincidentally, I was in the Eocene too, just a little over a year ago.
Oh really?
But I was in Wyoming.
Yeah. I'm looking for Basilosaurus fossils in this area, which you're probably never going to find, but you can always hope. So
where were you again?
This is eastern Arkansas.
Oh, Arkansas, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, not
in this
like
area,
Basilosaurus there, but I get what you're saying.
Yeah, they've been found there before, actually, in this spot. but the fact that it's unlikely I'm going to find any, but still, you can always hope. In this
Isn't it?
area,
I thought like
yeah,
all of those. Well, no, those aren't the really ancient whales. Those are
right,
relatively recent. So yeah, Basilosaurus you could
yeah,
find out elsewhere, but most of the stuff was like in Pakistan
right.
or yeah,
Pakistan, India, the protocetids are mostly there. The pachycetids, yeah.
yeah,
The
and North Africa, as I remember, right?
Yeah, Egypt, a lot of them
Yeah.
in Egypt. I'll get into that too. In this area, you can find shark teeth of a specific genus only of the Eocene, Basilosaurus, and many invertebrates. The oyster layer, I call it, in this area is a massive fossil bed of shells. How do these shells sort out so high in the strata in the hydrologic sorting model, given their density? Here's me marking the line of where that oyster layer ends, and here I am searching the oyster layer. Here's one of the shells from this layer. I found this shell, which I later identified as Venericardia planicosta. They are known only from Eocene rock. What are the odds of this in a hydrologic sorting or ecologic zonation model? Shells of all periods should be found together. Why no ammonites from the Cretaceous or gastropods from the Devonian? There were some that had the same density as the shell I'm holding. Why are they not there?
Well, I have a theory, and that or I have a thought, a hypothesis, if you will, and it is that
Yeah,
the wanna pretenders don't care what the truth is; they just want to believe something else.
yeah, I've essentially been told that, so that's probably not far off. Another example, fossils are not just found disjointed hundreds of feet apart. Here's a slab I found of Carboniferous era Archimedes bryozoa and a fragment of a typical small trilobite of that period. The trilobite is right here, kind of embedded in here. It's just the tail, so to speak. Here's the Archimedes bryozoa. They call them Archimedes because of that spiral. Archimedes bryozoa are only found in Carboniferous and Permian. There are no extant mollusks, no Cambrian trilobites, etc. Horned coral, or rugosa coral, lived in from the Middle Ordovician to the end of the Permian. I found them in Arkansas among Carboniferous strata in northwest Arkansas. Why would these coral only be in these layers while other coral species survive past the Permian? They are essentially the same organisms with the same ecologic niches and densities. This is
I
one I
think it's going to
found.
be necessary for people who are aware of modern day Arkansas and only understand that much about it. They don't realize that it's had an interesting paleo history.
It has, yeah.
Wasn't Arkansas like an archipelago at one point? I don't do a
Well,
lot of studies on
it's
Arkansas, so
it's
you'll have to
been
remind me.
underwater a couple times. Like the Carboniferous, it was the upper half of Arkansas was a Carboniferous sea, and the lower half was a Cretaceous sea. I'll get into that in a minute too.
Okay, and for Arkansas, this was not the Western Interior Seaway, right?
Uh, no, it might have been like the very base of it, but for the Cretaceous, I think it was the very base of that seaway.
Okay.
Yeah, obviously not the Carboniferous.
Oh yeah, that's right. Because in the Western Interior Seaway, the entirety of Texas was underwater. And
Yeah.
Texas was underwater twice as well, because we have
Hmm.
our biggest mountain in this state is actually a coral reef,
Yeah.
and it's amazing that coral, as you're showing right now, coral can
Hmm.
only form when the waters are the right level from the for the sun to get through. They have to be at the right
Right.
depth, and they have to be under pretty pristine conditions. So it
Hmm.
can't be a global catastrophe. It's got to be clear, placid water
Hmm.
for the most part for a long period of time. So this stuff can
Yeah.
only grow like a couple centimeters per year, and yet we have this coral formation that's 2,000 feet high.
Hmm. Yeah. That's why I've never tried to keep coral in a saltwater tank. They're just too hard to keep and too expensive. So I've just kind of skipped over those, trying to keep coral.
Yep.
Yeah. Index fossils are fossils found in one geologic unit and are widespread in that strata throughout the world. Many of these have similar densities and ecologic niches. So how are they distributed in this way in any flood model? Here are just some of these that are, prominent index fossils. Conodonts were small eel-like animals that lived from the late Cambrian to the end of the Triassic. 1,500 species are known, and each species had distinctive teeth, though they weren't actually teeth. I'm just going to call them teeth, that are useful in biostratigraphy. Here's a variety of conodont teeth of the Ordovician period. Just all
I
kinds of
think
crazy shit.
most people agree that functionally these are teeth, even if there is a
Right.
standard rooted in the gum kind of definition, because not
Mhm.
everything has them rooted in gums necessarily. So
Right.
I think we universally call conodonts teeth.
Yeah. And some say they were used for filter feeding and the weird layout they have, but that's not widely accepted, I don't believe.
Well, let's not get into beliefs now.
Right. Conodont biostratigraphy is well understood because of its applications for finding hydrocarbons. The conodont elements are heated to show the maximum temperature reached in the past in sedimentary rock. The resulting colors of the teeth are ranked on the conodont color alteration index. Colors range from amber to black to white and to clear on that scale, depending on what temperature they were in the past. See all kinds of ranges from the natural amber color. They get darker, then they get lighter, and finally clear. And here's an area that has CAI values that differ. They differ even in the same strata, like Carboniferous is this graph.
You're going to need to explain CAI values.
Yeah,
layman audience.
Okay, we got a yellow. That's 1. That's the amber color, and we got 6, which is the clear, and in between is kind of a black color. So
okay, so what is the significance of the CAI?
That indicates the sedimentary rock formed under different temperatures.
Okay.
And with a global flood model, temperatures in a layer of strata should be fairly uniform as they were laid down very quickly. I said a year, but really each layer would be laid down in less than that. If we're being realistic.
Yeah, they're talking about they want to say that all geologic structures were formed in the same event.
Yeah.
And that the year was the entire duration of the flood, so that even the recession period, so all of the inundation would not have taken a year. That would have been quite abrupt.
Yeah. And conodont temporal range for the Devonian period on this graph, with similar sizes and densities, they shouldn't sort out like this. You have some in the early Devonian, some in the late Devonian. Same for the Cambrian Ordovician. 1,500 species sort out like this. Some are in the early Cambrian, some are in the late Ordovician.
It has happened a number of times
and again,
that young Earth creationists have begun to study historical geology, petrogeology, paleontology, and so forth. And through these various applications, they come to realize that there's a reality in the geologic column that cannot be denied.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And maybe I've heard creationists say that in some cases, if they're like working for, in petrogeology, they would Monday through Friday believe that the Earth is millions of years old, and then on Saturday and Sunday it's 6,000 years again.
Right. It's kind of, that's to compartmentalize it.
Mm-hmm.
Again, same for the Triassic.
That was Glenn Morton's argument.
Yeah. And Andrew Snelling did something similar. He would publish in secular journals and publish in creationist journals, and it's kind of a
at the same time.
Confusing situation. Okay, Tethys Sea, Eocene, 40 million years ago. The Tethys Sea is right here. I included the whole world though. The distribution of ancient cetaceans and the known shorelines of the Eocene, Tethys Sea, etc., is strong evidence of a snapshot of time, not a single global flood event. Basilosaurid, and even protocoetid whales are found fossilized along the ancient shorelines of the Eocene in Egypt, India, Europe, the USA, and Peru. There's a Paragocetus right here, and there's a new Perucetus, which was just unveiled, the biggest one. And there's even Georgicetus up here, which is a protocoetid, legged whale.
Yeah, legs that fully functioning or were fully developed legs, except that if I remember correctly, in Georgicetus, they're not connected to the pelvis.
Right. They're not connected to the pelvis, so they couldn't really walk on land that effect. They were more like a. Yeah. They went on land. It was more like a seal.
Yeah. So they're already vestigial in a way that again can't be denied. I mean, the legs are there. They're obviously legs. The pelvis is there. It's just either the pelvis was not connected to the spine anymore, or the legs were not connected to the pelvis anymore. I don't remember which one the situation was.
I think the pelvis wasn't connected to the spine.
Mm. And interestingly, where you note your red spot for Arkansas and for Texas, I was at a Cretaceous beach which is right up near where by the Red River, where Texas meets Oklahoma, and there's an area there where a river offshoot of the Red River has cut through all this strata to get down to Cretaceous rock, and has revealed a place of thousands of ammonites, where ammonite shells, dead ammonites, would wash up onto the shore and then just like sit there and percolate and just like, get more and more piles on them as you do in some waterways. And they fill in with sand and mud and that sort of thing. And what you end up with looks like, but because of the way the river cuts through, it looks like a cobblestone road made of ammonite shells.
No, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, it was an interesting. It was the most interesting site that I've ever seen as far as a paleontological dig of that sort.
I've yet to find an ammonite because I haven't really searched any Cretaceous strata, and that's an important point because I haven't been in Cretaceous strata. That's why I haven't found the ammonites. So this is the Precambrian, the Ediacaran fossils. They're allegedly pre-flood, most creationists claim. This contradicts the creationist argument that delicate organisms must have formed in the flood, as all Ediacaran biota are soft-bodied animals that are the most difficult to fossilize. Here we have Dickinsonia and Charnia, which no one really knows their affinities that well. It's been debated, but they're some kind of organism, and they're soft-bodied. So,
do you have anything from the Grand Canyon in this slideshow?
Yeah, I do. I get to that.
Okay,
yeah.
I'll keep my mouth shut till we get to that then.
Okay, yeah. Okay, Isotellus trilobites, the largest trilobites up to 30 inches. With the hydrologic sorting model, they should be at the bottom of strata in Cambrian rock, or even Precambrian. Instead, they're in the middle to late Ordovician. Pretty impressive trilobite, and that's worth a lot of money, that size trilobite. This giant ammonite is found in the late Cretaceous, which is pretty high up on the column. Should be found much lower in strata if the hydrologic sorting model was viable. Mammalia forms of the late Triassic and Jurassic are distinct from modern mammals. However, they have similar densities and likely ecological niches. Why are these mammalia forms and modern black rats not found together? Large mammal footprints fossils do not appear until after the Cretaceous period. Fossil prints are found throughout the fossil record, which, by the way, was underwater as they were being formed somehow. How are these formed in a flood? I don't know. But here you see Jurassic, Cretaceous dinosaur footprints, and then finally the Eocene, you see mammal footprints, large mammals.
In the Paluxy River trackway, do you have anything from that in this?
No, is that what's the guy's name? Carl
in
Bob,
Paluxy River, the dinosaur tracks. The creationist argument there was that one of the dinosaur tracks. It was one of the dinosaur tracks that if you look at it wrong with your head on sideways, standing on a chair, it kind of looks like a human footprint because of the way that the mud would fall back in when a three-toed theropod walks. But in reality, you can see that it's actually a good sized theropod that's walking there. But the thing about those tracks are that you can tell, because I was personally in the riverbed, cleaning out some of these trackways during a dry period when we could get in there and keep the tracks pristine. And you can tell by the tracks that these animals are not running for their lives the way the creationists always try to paint the picture. They're milling about in different directions, and you can tell by the prints when they stop or when they turn or when they go investigate something here. They're meandering.
Yeah, they're not running. That's true. The first evolution of pollen has recently been debated. However, its most abundant appearance begins in the early Cretaceous. Why are pollen fossils not found in Cambrian, Ordovician, Silurian, etc. rock in a hydrologic sorting model? None was washed in during the flood.
When you and I were in the Eocene, in our respective parts of the world, when you were in Eocene strata in Arkansas, and I was in Eocene strata in Wyoming, there were no dinosaurs. There were no. Like the Permian therapsids and that sort of thing in neither place. When I was in South Africa, working Permian strata, again, no dinosaurs, but no mammals either.
Yeah, it's weird how that works. It's almost like they're time periods with different.
All around the world, it remains consistent everywhere you go in the world.
Everywhere in the world, yeah. And stomach contents are a way to tell what lived alongside what when. One example is Pachycormus, a Jurassic-era fish recently found with an ammonite in its stomach. Why not an Ordovician-era Orthoceras or a modern Nautilus? It's because those species didn't live alongside each other. And there are a million examples of this. I just chose this one.
When I was in the Permian, South Africa, everything we found was exactly what we already knew existed in the Permian.
Right. Right, without exception. I mean, a creationist could go out and find one of these Glossopteris fossils in Cambrian rock and upend everything, but no one's ever done that. Fossils found in Permian strata that point to a supercontinent based on its distribution. Pangaea was theorized to exist during this time. It forms a puzzle that's hard to explain without long periods of time and plate tectonics. All right, stable oxygen 18 and 16 isotopes of marine fossils show temperature changes over time. Belemnites, brachiopods, shark and fish teeth, conodonts, and crinoids have been used to obtain oxygen 18 and 16 samples from various layers. You can see that the temperature was very warm in the Cambrian Ordovician, cools down a little through the Devonian, declines even more in the Carboniferous, warms back up through the Permian. And that was done with a sensitive high-resolution ion microprobe. This is the kind of machine that they have a button right here. They don't know what it does, but they don't press it because they're afraid of what it might do. You know, they tell the new people, "Hey, we don't know what that does. Don't press it."
Maybe something good.
I'm just kidding.
Maybe something bad. But we'll never know because you're going to guard it.
Yeah, it might implode the universe. Don't press that button.
Now, you were talking about the temperature ranges at the different periods of history. And we know that in the Jurassic and Cretaceous, it was a bit warmer than it is now on average, which is why the sea levels were so much higher.
Right.
But then when you get to the Permian, at the end Permian, the Permian Triassic, it was stupid high.
Yeah.
Resulting
And I'll get into those in a minute. Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Along with oxygen 1816, strontium 8786 can also be used to infer the paleoclimate, as shown in this paper on the isotope ratios of Permian shark teeth. Used together, a powerful cross-reference, they use both. So it's kind of like cross-referencing radiometric dating. It's similar to that, only they're not looking at time periods, they're looking at temperatures of the time period that's already known.
Another thing that I managed to do was when I went to that Cretaceous beach that I mentioned, just grab some soil samples and take it back to the lab and scan it under a microscope. And I found ocods and diatoms and shark's teeth and bunches. I had to identify all these different species that I'd never heard of before. But I'm going through the book of Cretaceous, microfossils to identify these things. And again, these are the things that lived then. They're not the things that live now.
Right. It's it's impossible to refute if they'll just look into it with an open mind. But
therein lies the problem.
Yeah, exactly. Polystrate fossils, that's not the technical term for it, but they're often found used against an old Earth, but actually they provide some evidence of past events during the Carboniferous period. The trees that are fossilized vertically are almost always in the Carboniferous, not in many layers, as creationists claim, and are almost always like opposites. During this period, evidence shows that the sea level
they're technically not trees at all.
Right.
So I mean, they're a species that doesn't exist today, and they're not. How would you describe what a lycopod is?
It's sort of like a big, tall, tree-looking fern, basically.
A fern.
Yeah.
Very good.
Yeah. But
I forget what the horsetail isn't. The horsetail
horsetail,
the closest to being modern.
Yeah.
So just a gigantic tree-sized horsetail.
Gigantic tree horsetail, yeah. And
at a time when there were no, when the trees that we have today did not yet exist.
Right, they didn't.
Or at least most of them didn't exist.
Right. During this period, evidence shows the sea level was much lower, with occasional pulses of depth increase. This would have inundated the coastal lycopod, lycopsid forests. This explains why most coal is found in the Carboniferous and why some of them are standing upright through coal seams and other sediment.
As I understand it, there was a lack of there was no way to break down the wood at that time. That they didn't. There's a bacteria that eats the cellulose.
Yeah.
I know I'm remembering this incorrectly, but it didn't exist then either.
Or something about the sap of the tree that wasn't.
Yeah, so I mean, so
digestible.
in the Carboniferous, you have like these just piles and piles of wood as trees fall over on each other, and there was nothing, there was no organism yet to decompose them,
Right.
such as we have now. And so it was at the end of the Carboniferous that we now had this enzyme or microbe that would do that, and so that's why 90% of our coal production comes from this period.
Right. And here's a relatively more recent example. Specimen Ridge is a formation of many successive petrified forests on top of each other. This indicates a long period of time to form in volcanic eruptions. The creationist excuse of trees sitting upright in lakes and being buried is lacking. All those layers of upright trees could not form in a lake unless this event took place over many successive events as well, which would defeat their argument. So,
how long would it take for each layer there? You have long enough for a tree to grow, and then for a flood to come in. I'm going with their argument. I'm not going with the actual, because I'm familiar with Specimen Ridge.
Yeah.
And this is my favorite example of how of proof of the old Earth. But I'll let you explain that. If you wanted to go with the creationist argument, and you want to imagine that all these trees grow to this height, well, they're all obviously taller than that because every one of these is broken off, right? They're only preserved the part that remains in the mud. So whatever stands taller than that, rots and erodes. But then if you have this flood that piles up all this mud, as the creationists imagine, well, then the flood goes away, and then the next layer of trees goes up. And there's like 27 layers of this.
Yeah.
So how long for each tree? And you've got the tree rings to go by.
Mm-hmm.
So 27 layers of these things. Even if you went by the creationist argument, you still have far exceeded your 6,000 years.
Yeah, there's really no way around it. Their best excuse is they sank to the bottom of a lake and were buried that way. They don't really.
They were all buried, all of them, 27 layers buried vertically.
Right, somehow on top of each other. Right. Yeah. The first leaves appear in the Devonian. Why are no leaves in Cambrian, Ordovician, or Silurian? They should have been washed in. I get they say it's ecologic zonation, but you'd think one leaf would wash in every now and then. The Permian Triassic extinction event, associated with a massive series of volcanic flood basalt eruptions 252 million years ago. During this event, all of these organisms died and are never found above this boundary again. Eurypterids, trilobites, acanthodians, gorgonopsians, and blastoids, among other things. Here's
another
the line.
Here's thing to remember about that is that there have been a number of flood basalt eruptions in geologic history, not just at the Permian Triassic, but every one of them. But none of them have ever occurred in human history. They've occurred in different parts of the world at different times in geologic history, and they are always associated with mass extinction events. But there's never been a flood basalt eruption that humans have ever witnessed. If there ever is one, and
we're pretty much done.
Having been that there's been several of them already, you would expect that there's going to be another flood basalt eruption. Those are awful. Nobody, people watching this have no idea the scale of a flood basalt eruption. It's like the one that you're talking about for the Permian extinction. That was basically a volcanic eruption the size of Siberia, or to put it another way, the size of the United States or Australia.
Yeah, it was a big eruption, and it was especially fatal for the Permian period because the continents were pretty much connected at the time.
Yep.
So here's the boundary, and above you have the Triassic. Fossils show that the recovery period, 252 million years on. It took complex marine ecosystems 1 million years. Recovery of trees, 6 million years. Recovery of coral, 8 million years. In light of a global flood, these reappearances have no explanation.
I did. Do you have? I mean, are you just a hobbyist, or do you have degrees of this? Because it's sounding like that you ought to have at least a Bachelor of Science in something here, right?
No, I'm actually just some guy, basically. But thank you.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. but I've been into science my whole life, so I hope I know something about it.
Well, if it's possible, you might
But
want to try to tack some letters on the end of your name.
I could always put a doctor in front of my name just for the appeal of it, you know.
Yeah,
But you know,
there's a
creationists do it
trailer
all
in
the time.
Alabama somewhere for $100. So they'll do that for
Yeah,
you.
yeah, that's what I've heard. All right, carbon 12 and 13 isotope ratios of the Permian Triassic extinction event. There's a massive decrease in carbon 13 compared to carbon 12 in rock layers associated with this extinction event that has zero explanation in a flood model. Loss of the ozone of the Permian Triassic. This is evidence. There is evidence that shows the ozone layer was lost during this event, including mutation of fossil plant spores during this time from UV rays. Here's some lycopsid spores and weird tetrahedral tetrads. They're all mutated from presumably UV rays. Why do these fossils appear this way in this area of strata and nowhere else?
That with the climate change, the global warming that was going on at the time, where the planetary temperature had raised, I think it was 5 degrees, which then was enough to release 13 trillion tons of frozen methane on the seafloor, which raised it another 5 degrees. So and that's global average temperatures. So it was quite profound, and the water then was so hot that coral reefs, most of the world died. There's only certain places where little oases here and there where some things were protected, and it was actually easier to stay alive on the land at that point than in the ocean. Huge areas where all oxygen was deprived. So these massive 40-foot fish that suddenly go belly up because there's no way for them to get any oxygen, and then there are oxygen. There are bacteria that consider oxygen poisonous. So without the oxygen in the water, well, then they take over, and then they create these toxic fumes out of the water. They're death zones underwater, and breathing the water near them from the surface will kill you also. So it was a hellscape.
Yeah. Yeah. I get into all those points here in a second. So
I should just shut up and let you.
No, you're good. No. I'm like you were saying, early Triassic marine fauna was species poor compared to the Permian, dominated by several disaster attacks. The bivalve claria is an example. Survivors were globally distributed species that were less prone to extinction than endemic species of a certain area. And stationary filter feeders, such as certain crinoid species, are far less abundant after the extinction event in the fossil record. The mobile ones are more common afterwards. And calcified organisms suffered greatly during the Permian Triassic event due to the ocean acidification. The least affected of this group had complex gas exchange systems and light calcification. The survivors also tended to be smaller. Then we go to the Cretaceous Paleogene, or the KT extinction event. I call it the KT extinction event. This event marks the end of all non-avian dinosaurs, mosasaurs, plesiosaurs, ammonites, and pterosaurs, among others. Above this event, with an exception of maybe a few tens of thousands of years, nothing like this is ever found above this. The KT boundary, a global layer of iridium-rich rock. Iridium is rare in the crust of the Earth, but common in asteroids. So where did this iridium come from in a flood model? And along with that, you have shocked quartz in the KT boundary. This type of quartz forms under pressure and heat, usually associated with impact events or nuclear explosions, which there weren't any back then. The iridium and quartz together in this layer is strong proof of the KT extinction event and a snapshot of time, not a sorted flood layer. Here's a sample from Haiti, and here's a sample from the impact crater itself in the Yucatan. And here's the Chicxulub crater itself, which has been dated to the mark of the KT extinction event. You can see cenotes form around the ring of the perimeter of the crater.
Yeah, I've been to some of those.
Yeah, I've been to the Yucatan when I was like 12. I didn't know those existed back then. I don't think so. I didn't see any, but
yeah, I was happy to see the pyramids at Chichen Itza and all of that. But the more exciting thing for me,
yeah,
the more exciting thing for me was to see the cenotes and to visually experience something from that impact.
Yeah. And tektites also form in the from impacts. Radiometric dating of KT tektites. Here's a graph. They're consistent using multiple methods and multiple samples from multiple areas, 4 countries, 4 dating methods, multiple minerals, not just tektites, and hundreds of or dozens of tests. And they all range from 63 to 66 million years old. And creationists like to argue against radiometric dating, but it's all fairly consistent. I mean, not fairly; it's very consistent.
It's overwhelmingly consistent. I mean, when you consider the number of studies that are done for any given area, for every level of strata in any given area that's exposed, and even when you do cores, when you find when you find like an intrusion of igneous rock, you can date that again, and we get consistent measurements for every site, everywhere, at every depth. So it's beyond absurd to pretend that because a couple of creationists deliberately fudged the dating of a rock from Mount St. Helens, that somehow means that we can't rely on this tried and tested, consistently true, verified method.
Austin and Morris are the ones who did that with the potassium argon method. And Austin admitted his samples weren't homogeneous, so it's likely some of it was xenocrysts and older samples in that sample anyway. And Morris straight up admitted that they were xenocrysts, so of course they're going to show up as older anyway, right from the get-go. And you're using the wrong method. So
yeah.
Pollen and spore fossils of the KT event. Pollen fossils are found below the KT boundary, while spores, such as ferns, are found above. Ferns are often the first plants to recolonize a devastated area. The absence of pollen after the extinction event indicates a snapshot of time, not hydrologic sorting or some other model. And limestone is made up partially of microorganisms. Creationists argue all limestone was created during the global flood, at least all biological limestone. If this is the case, why are fossils in limestone different for each geologic epoch? Permian limestone contains things like trilobites and eurypterids, while later limestone, like Jurassic and Cretaceous, contains fossils like ammonites and coccolithophores. Limestone can be made by biological or geological processes. Modern limestone is often made up of organisms called coccolithophores. These creatures evolved in the Triassic. Before this, limestone composition is quite different. How does the global flood explain the composition of this limestone in different layers? Coccolithophores even suffered a marked decline briefly in the fossil record after the KT extinction event. You see on this graph, they were very plentiful in the Cretaceous, and they drop off suddenly at that line. Then they recover a bit, and it fluctuates from there. And they're still here today. And the complete absence of pterosaurs above the KT boundary makes no sense in light of a global flood model, any model. Pterosaurs and birds are both very light and, of course, able to fly. The fact that pterosaurs did not fly over the floodwaters and become deposited above the KT boundary is a refutation of any flood model.
Creationists don't understand either that the diversity of birds, well, in this instance, because all the birds that we have now come basically from 2 genetic lines, and there were a half a dozen others in the Cretaceous of lineages of birds, basic lineages of birds that died out at that period. So they were like Hesperornis and some that could not fly, and then even some of the flying birds went out at that time.
Right.
So everything that we have now, and you look at all the diversity of birds, but that comes from 2 genetic lineages, paleonates and neonates, and that's it. And but they have no idea how rich the fossil record was for primitive birds that nobody's ever seen alive.
They discovered a new feathered dinosaur recently. It's called Darlong. It's early Cretaceous, I think. It's kind of unrelated, but it's a cool fossil.
Okay.
Yeah. Grand Canyon stratigraphy, and I get more into the Grand Canyon later, makes no sense in a hydrologic sorting model. Multiple sandstone, limestone, and shale layers are distributed throughout its column. Their densities don't make sense and are often inverted.
Yeah, how would you get how would you get how would you get the shale and the limestone, sandstone? How would you get them in separate levels? And we'll go limestone, and we'll go to these other deposits, and then we'll go back to limestone again. How the hell does hydrological sorting do that?
It doesn't, but they have to, support their worldview, and that's.
Can you imagine having to support a belief that is evidently false? I mean, all the evidence is against it. There's nothing for it. You have to lie to defend it. You have to.
Mm-hmm.
You have to misrepresent all the data. And when it comes to the Grand Canyon, when you have one of the higher layers has what is it? Some kind of amphibious early tetrapod, but it's one of the higher layers in
Coconino sandstone. That's the next slide.
Very good. Let's look at it.
All right. I think it's the next slide. No, it's the slide after.
Okay. Well, I'll wait till we get there.
Okay.
And I can't remember what the animal was that was leaving the footprints, but it was
some Permian creature. Yeah.
It was like on a sand dune. It was a slightly moist condition at best that would crystallize the sand at the point where it's making these tracks. And so here's an animal that's walking around on dry land, maybe on a dewy morning, but certainly not. I mean, we got fossilized raindrops.
Yeah.
In the Grand Canyon, in the higher levels. So how do you get that?
Yeah. Yeah. And I'll just suffice this to say is that all the fossils are in order in the Grand Canyon as expected. And our friends at Answers in Genesis have a flat Earth level argument, I think, as to explain vertebrate tracks in the Coconino sandstone, which is what we were talking about, the Permian tracks. They say they were climbing to escape the rising floodwaters, which, okay, here's some of those tracks. Tracks in the Coconino sandstone, of which there are a lot. There are many of them. They can't be explained in a flood. How would the tracks be made midway up the column if the water is depositing these layers while being submerged? You're telling me these things are walking under hundreds of feet of water and making the tracks? Creationist rationalizations for these tracks are
air-breathing tetrapods.
Yeah. Traveling to escape rising floodwaters in a layer already underwater based on stratigraphic position makes no sense. And predicted fossils. This is Tiktaalik, a very famous one. Tiktaalik was predicted to inhabit a Devonian freshwater habitat, so researchers found strata that fit that description in the remote Arctic of Ellesmere Island. If we were not looking at a geologic time period, this wouldn't be possible. A global flood model doesn't work at all for predicting where fossils are going to be. And here's kind of something else we were talking about. Trilobites of Arkansas. All trilobite fossils are found below the Permian-Triassic boundary. The blue half of Arkansas is mostly Carboniferous. Without exception, this is where all trilobites are found. The yellow half is mostly Cretaceous, and not one trilobite has ever been found there. What flood model explains this? I even went on a Facebook page, fossil Facebook page of Arkansas, and looked up trilobites and where they've been found. It's all in the blue half. So it's not just scientists that are making stuff up, as a lot of creationists will say. It's civilians finding them where they're expected to be found and posting about them online. So anyone can look at
I read a story here where I live in the Dallas Metroplex, the neighborhood that I live. It was a school bus driver who went through the park down the end of the street that I live on after a rainstorm, and the rain was so heavy that one of the cliff sides in the creek, collapsed. And as he goes down there to survey the damage, he discovers a mosasaur fossil embedded in that cliffside where the cliff has fallen off, and now is exposed this mosasaur. And the funny thing is that this the school bus driver was a young Earth creationist who thought that dinosaurs were a hoax, and now he's discovered a mosasaur.
That's pretty ironic.
Yeah.
That's a funny story. Yeah. I've yet to find a mosasaur, and it's mostly because I've been looking up here. There are no mosasaurs in the Carboniferous, unfortunately. I need to go down here some.
Mind you, you'll find some cool
Basin.
stuff in the Carboniferous. You'll find some cool stuff in the Carboniferous.
Yeah, there's some cool stuff in the Carboniferous, but I want to search some new areas. So I've searched here all my life. You know, I'm kind of fossiled out from this area. Fossils of the Williston Basin, the Cambrian Tertiary, which, by the way, they say this doesn't exist anywhere in the world. Cambrian to Tertiary layers all in one order. Here it is in the Williston Basin, by the way. But anyway, core sample shows Cambrian trilobites, Canella Ordovician trilobites, late Ordovician brachiopods and corals, Devonian trilobites, and Devonian conodont species, as you would expect, in the layers laid down in order. And there are like 30 places on Earth where this can be found in order, which a lot of creationists say this can't be found anywhere.
Well, that's if you're talking about exposure. Well, one of the other things that people leave out is if you take a core sample, then there's 20 some odd places where you can get if you dig a core sample, you can get the whole thing.
And paleomagnetism is the direction of magnetic minerals and rocks, showing Earth's magnetic pole reversals over time. As the poles have reversed many times in Earth's history, this is hard for creationists to explain. Most of them try to fit hundreds of magnetic reversals into 1 year of Noah's flood. Paleoaltitudes, location on the plates of a certain area that's sampled, can also be calculated with paleomagnetism. And you can see where this plate was, at what latitude, at what time period, in coordination with radiometric dating and paleomagnetism. And it lines up with the theorized movement and speed of the movement of the plates. Not some catastrophic plate tectonic nonsense. It matches with the long time model. So,
and when you and estimates based on the molecular clock for genetic phylogenies also corroborate this.
There are a lot of things that corroborate and cross-reference all of this stuff.
I did say collaborate, didn't I? I didn't mean that. Corroborate is what I meant to say. That's what I meant to say.
Yeah. Okay, tar pits, which are fairly young. La Brea in Azerbaijan. There's also one in Venezuela, I think. They're 60,000 years and 190,000 years old, respectively. Only mammals from this time period are preserved in the pits. No Eocene mammals, no dinosaurs, no Permian therapsids. You can see on the left, there's like 300 direwolf skulls right there. You're telling me 300 of those fell in the pits, but Dimetrodon never did, which supposedly lived at the same time, or anything.
If I was alive at that point, I could see that. That would be so heartbreaking.
Yeah.
To see any of those poor canids struggling.
Yeah, it was probably not a quick death. So, yeah. Now, occasionally floods do happen, or animals die in water. This is illustrated by the fossil Anchiornis, which, by the way, is a feathered dinosaur, seen fossilized with small fish. Why are no fossilized complex vertebrates, including even bony fish, not even bony fish, are found in Cambrian strata in a global flood model? You'd think one would be washed in every now and then. And transitional fossils, of course, don't fit anywhere in a flood or creationist model of any kind. But I've cataloged 2,431 transitional species and genera. So there's probably like 5,000 or more species total. But
now your list is only for vertebrates, correct?
No, I've got invertebrates. I've got some invertebrates, some plants.
Okay,
but
that I want to talk to you about that for a moment because I really want you to finish this. There was a zoologist named Kathleen Hunt who wrote way back in Y2K. She published this thing, Transitional Fossils Fact for Talk.Origins, and it was a list of a few hundred. I think it was 400. Transitional intermediate species, and she provided a short description of each one. It didn't have to be a long one. It was just, why is this considered? And she would invest a little bit more time in some of the more interesting ones.
Yeah.
But I've seen your list,
Hmm.
and I'm very interested and excited about it.
Hmm.
I can't wait till it becomes a public link that we can share.
Yeah.
So and I realize you're not getting paid for this. You know
Yeah.
that you're just doing this for your own passion. I think that
Hmm.
Kathleen Hunt did the same thing.
Hmm.
But it is time to update her list, because since she wrote that, I can't tell you how many transitional species have been found since then. We're talking about
There was,
Y2K. Since
yeah,
Y2K,
there was
we've been
one
in a
found 2 days ago, a new one.
yeah, we've been in a paleontological boon since then.
Yeah.
So that 400, you said your list is over a couple of you're in the thousands now.
Yeah. It's in the thousands.
Yeah.
I'm not sure how many thousands, but because I included genera, but yeah,
Yeah.
thousands.
Now
2,400 at least.
hers are exclusively vertebrates.
Hmm.
So just for ease of comparison, I'd like you to delineate vertebrates from some of the other intermediates in
Yeah.
your list. But
Most of these
I'm
on there.
very interested for you
Yeah.
to publish and make that public.
Yeah. I was editing this today, so I am working on it. I'm cleaning it up and adding descriptions, so it'll be ready someday.
Yeah, someday. And
And
it'll never
in
be
conclusion,
complete. That's the funny thing.
it's pretty.
At this
It'll never be complete. It's still being added to. There were 2 days ago, a lagarpetid, which is a flightless pterosaur ancestor, was discovered from Brazil in the Triassic 2 days ago. And like a day before that, Tutcetus was discovered in Egypt. So,
tell
in
me about
conclusion,
Tutcetus. Obviously, an
Tutcetus,
Egyptian whale.
yeah, it's the smallest known basilosaurid.
Hmm.
Yet it's only a little bit longer than a human length, average human length. So it's a pretty interesting find. They found before that, even a week before that, they found Perucetus, the largest basilosaurid whale ever found.
Oh, that one, and it was early too. That was like what wasn't it like 37 to 39 million years old?
Something like that, yeah, around
And
there.
absolutely massive.
Yeah, potentially bigger than the blue whale.
Yeah, so now that's a surprise, because
Hmm.
that's when whales were really early.
Hmm.
So for anything to suddenly, I mean, it would have to it's relatively sudden in the fossil record to go in just 2 million years
Yeah.
from things that on average were like 13, 15 feet long, typically,
Hmm.
to as big as a blue whale.
Yeah. The
That's pretty
ichthyosaurs
extreme.
got big quick too in the fossil record. So it seems to be an ocean thing where they don't have the constraints of gravity as much anymore. They just get bigger and bigger fast.
That's
Yeah.
true. And then but the advantage that ichthyosaurs had is the same thing that the cetids had, because
Mhm.
I mean, you didn't have you with the because they were Jurassic, the ichthyosaurs, there weren't any dramatically devastating predators in the oceans before the ichthyosaurs. Now, ichthyosaurs faded
Mhm.
out at the end of the Jurassic. They were being replaced by other things, especially the mosasaurs,
Right.
which I guess mosasaurs got quite huge quite quick
Yeah, they did.
as well. I mean, yeah, I mean the first mosasaurid was no bigger than like a Nile monitor,
Yeah.
and
They're
then
they're
it's
varanids,
very
aren't they?
quick that yeah,
Mosasaurs are
and
varanids.
well, uh, very close. I don't want to say that
Close
they
to
are
them. Yeah.
varanids, but they're very
Mhm.
close. The mosasaurids are their own clade, a
Yeah.
sister group to varanids, but
Mhm.
but they're very similar, and they went from like I said, the size of a Nile monitor
Mhm.
to the size of whales
Yeah.
in a short period of time. But then what competition do they have?
Yeah.
You know,
Not much.
there was not much. And so when you go for the cetids, now that you have this mammalian predator out there, and it's exploring a niche that had been vacated by the mosasaurs and everything else. And so, hey, I've got this playground. I can just get huge.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Who knows what else is out there? We might find something even bigger someday.
I was surprised that they would find it. This was a surprise for me, because I would have thought that the whales got bigger and bigger and bigger
Mhm.
over time. I wouldn't have thought that something would be out there, and in just 1 or 2 million years, it becomes that freakishly massive.
Yeah.
But then in the Permian, we have dicynodonts. That most dicynodonts are very small. I mean, most
Mhm.
of them are the size of dogs. but then they find one that's the size of an elephant.
Yeah.
And it's a Dicynodont, a pachyderm size Dicynodont. You know, can't argue that they can become, you know, quite big quite quick.
Yeah. And I think the presentation and our personal experience has proven that these are time periods and not some flood layers. So that's the presentation.
Definitely not.
Hope you enjoyed it.
I did, as I did before, the one you did before, and my audience very much did as well.
Oh, thank you.
You would do well if you edited videos and instead of doing it in the PowerPoint presentation, it wouldn't take much to snazz up the presentations that you're doing. And I'm not gonna promise that you would make any money, because science videos just don't.
Right.
I'm sorry, if you want to make money in YouTube, drama is apparently where it's at.
Yeah, or video games, stuff like that.
Yeah, I've seen exquisite science documentaries that have hardly any hits at all. The videos that I love to do the most, my taxonomy videos, they require so much work that it can take me 2 weeks to do a taxonomy video, and it will get a third to a quarter of the views of if I just turn the camera on myself and I'm talking while walking through a park or sitting on a beach or something like that. Those will get more views. I can't understand why. The more effort you put into it, the less it pays, it seems to be. But I care about the education. I want people to see the imagery, which means I have to go hunt for that imagery. And then you have to do the scripting and everything, because you don't want to say anything wrong in a science documentary.
Right.
Because you know that our own side of that argument will come down on us. You know, creationists can say whatever the hell they want, and their believers will. The Christians and Muslims will ally together against the atheists. But if you say something academically wrong, then somebody that knows better, whether they're a Christian or atheist or Muslim or whatever, they're going to come down on you. So you want to make sure that you're correct.
Yeah, the thing is, we'll correct ourselves and we'll accept the correct option, and they won't. So,
yep, because there is no objective truth. I had a criticism on my channel 2 days ago where somebody told me that I was biased towards objective truth. I'm biased toward being objective. I thought those were opposites.
Yeah.
That you're either biased or objective, but now you can be both. Now they mean the same thing.
Yeah. It's confusing.
And that same person told me that objective truth doesn't matter. That religious truth does, even though that same post also admitted that there is no truth in religion. So it's just whatever you want to believe, and that what they praise. This was the interesting thing. I had a conversation with somebody else about this who said the same thing again last week. He said that I said, "How do you determine what is truth?" He said, "Certainty." So it's the truth if you really believe it's the truth. Yes. Okay. Well, I'm getting a number of believers who are chiming in on that same thing. If you want to believe it, and if you really believe it, then that's the truth, and it doesn't matter what the facts are. That's just objective truth. That's just something. That's just things that you can prove to be true. We don't care about that. We want to believe things we can believe to be true, and you get to choose what you believe and believe what you choose. And it doesn't matter what the facts are or what the truth is.
Yeah. I did a survey on a creationist Facebook page like a year ago, and I gave the option, what would change your mind? I gave the option of nothing and some other things. That was the most popular answer, with like 130 people saying nothing would ever change their mind.
So being unreasonable is being praised as a virtue.
Right. There's a lot that could change my mind, but the evidence doesn't show what they want it to. So,
all right. So I'm going to let you make a closing statement. I am eager to see your list of transitional fossils, your updated list, because we've needed an update for a long time. Right. There's so much out there. And they've got to be in categories. When Kathleen Hunt had hers, she had like the dinosaur category and
Yeah, I've
a
got them in
Jurassic
categories.
category,
Yeah.
proper mammal category, and all of that.
Yeah, I've got them categorized, and it needs some work, but it's not. It's like 60-70% done, I would say. I might add some photos to it. I don't know if I want to do that or not, really, but
Images are helpful. The descriptions matter more.
descriptions are more helpful.
Yeah.
But anyway, yeah, I hope you guys liked the presentation. I'm
Indeed.
probably not the most qualified person academically to do this presentation, but I hope I did well in the eyes of people who are academically qualified. So,
well, there's some of us that care more about the data than authority,
right?
Because we understood what Carl Sagan said, that arguments from authority is worthless.
That's true. But anyway, these are time periods. This is not a global flood, and that's pretty much all there is to it. So that's my statement on that.
Outstanding. Jackson Roe, thank you for being on again.
Thank you for having me.